If this isn't the fastest run I've done, I will eat my hat. This was incredibly smooth. The RNG was decent. The drone could have spawned in a better spot, but what's the timer here? Oh, 11:24, hell yeah. That's like 30 seconds faster than my fastest run so far? I genuinely don't think I can get any faster than this. Like, the drone could have spawned in a better spot, but overall the RNG was very good. Well, how the tables turn, table turn. Today I shall be the sweaty nerd that tells you how to do something very efficiently. I've always wanted to do the Plague Star event efficiently because doing it inefficiently is an absolute ball ache. If you don't have the right setup, the Hemo site is just a pain to fight and it takes forever. So I've put together a fairly efficient solo setup for the advanced version of the Plague Star that averages somewhere around 12 minutes per run. Now I wanted to make this somewhat accessible, so I'm not using any ribbons and I wasn't using any gear wheel items outside of the Arcwing launcher. It's also very reliable, simple and safe. We're not running a complicated setup, it's pretty straightforward, and the frame build we're using is extremely beefy. If however you're using this in a squad setup, you can tweak it a little bit because you don't need as much defense since the enemy attention is going to be divided amongst multiple people. And finally, before we get into the setup, I would like to thank the people that commented on yesterday's video because I took a lot of pointers from there, so I wouldn't be able to put this together without your help. So for the frame we're using Nova, more specifically Solova. I'm using my hyper beefy version of this and I will show you the build in a little bit. For the primary, there are a lot of weapons that are good in this event, but I personally chose the Piranha Prime as my weapon of choice. This absolutely shreds the Hemo site if you strip its armor. It doesn't have a ton of range though, so you're gonna have to be fairly close. But it's worth it because the damage this does is ridiculous. And the melee weapon doesn't really matter, though I was running with the Glyph Prime just to have a solid weapon for the rest of the mission. A very important part of this setup is actually the Unairu focus school, because one of the nodes gives your operator's second ability Armor Strip. This is really good, you don't even have to max it out because it's stacked, so you're just gonna have to cast it multiple times. This is how we're stripping away all the Hemo site's armor almost instantly. For my Nova setup, I didn't actually change anything, it's just a super beefy Slova setup that runs Neutron Star and Molecular Fission to keep your null stars up, and when you stack that on top of Vitality and Adaptation, you are almost unkillable. The one downside of this build is that it has negative range, so it's not very good for wormholing the Grineer drone towards the Plague Star. There's something you can do to significantly speed up the escort section of the Plague Star mission, especially when the drone spawns very far away from the boil. I only did it very rarely because wormhole is fairly expensive and I didn't want to use energy pizzas. And in order for it to be more effective, you need more range, and that will hurt you in the final section of the mission if you're doing this solo. Because interestingly enough, having a lot of range on this build absolutely destroys your tankiness. Because we're relying on null stars to give us 90% damage reduction, but you need to have enough null stars for the damage reduction to actually be there. And if you have a lot of range, the null stars are constantly flying off to hit enemies and you are losing damage reduction. However, as I've mentioned already, if you're playing in a squad, so the enemy attention is divided amongst multiple people, you don't need as much defense and you can put in more range so that you can chauffeur the drone to the boil much faster. Next up, we have the Piranha setup. Extremely simple, once again, straight up a crit build with pathogen rounds and convulsion for corrosive, and then we're running Expel Infested, or if you have it, primed Expel Infested because the Hemo site is an infested creature. Now, because I normally run a Riven on my Piranha Prime, I'm actually double stacking raw damage with Hornet Strike and secondary Merciless, so if you have a different Forma setup, you can put in heat damage or something like that instead of Hornet Strike, but it's honestly fine, especially if you're not particularly good at dealing with the Hemo site and also keeping up the stacks of secondary Merciless at the same time. And finally, we have the Companion. I'm using the Dirija with Verglas. This can pretty much solo the first 3 stages of the bounty, and it helps a lot during the final stages as well. It's running a sort of duplex bond DPS setup. I've already made a video about it. If you want to watch it, in the card or in the description, or it's somewhere. I linked it somewhere. The reason it's so good is because it does enough damage to clear the first 3 stages of the bounty on its own, and it provides a ton of energy for you in the final stage of the bounty. The way it works is, because we don't have any efficiency on our Nova setup, every time we cast Molecular Prime, which happens every time a Hemo site comes out, we spawn a duplex copy of the Dirija, which then goes around and clears out the small infested. This, first of all, helps to manage the horde of infested that's constantly attacking you throughout the final stage of the bounty, but second of all, duplex copies have a 50% chance to drop an energy orb whenever they kill something. So the boil is gonna be covered in energy orbs in the final stage. Now, there is not much to say about the first 3 stages of the bounty. You need to fly to the cave, you need to pick up the mixture, you need to put it into the mixer, then you have to take it to the drone, and you escort the drone to the boil. That's pretty self-explanatory. You can't do much there. The way you deal with the hemocytes is pretty straightforward as well, actually. Do not cast Molecular Prime before it's out of the boil, or it might get stuck. Jump into your operator mode as it's walking out, and strip its armor with your second ability, before popping back into your Warframe, casting Molecular Prime, and shooting it in the face a bunch. And that's kind of it. Now, you ideally want to have your Merciless, or whatever arcane you have on the Piranha, stacked up, so make sure you occasionally blast the smaller infested to keep it topped off. And if you want to be really fancy, and this isn't as difficult as it might seem, you want to try and line up the Piranha's passive prog with the opening of the hemocyte's weak spot. This requires a little bit of practice because you need to get 3 kills in 2 seconds to summon the second Piranha and go absolutely ham, but you're constantly swarmed by the small infested, so as long as you time it right, you can pull it off fairly easily. It's not entirely necessary though, so if you're not feeling it, it's not a big deal because the Piranha, even without the passive prog, will absolutely shred the hemocyte. And that's kind of it. I'm very happy with how this setup turned out because it's fast, it's reliable, it just gets the job done. So as always guys, I thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it helpful, and I wish you good luck with the hemocytes, and I would also like to extend a special thank you to all the channel members. Thank you very much guys, I really appreciate your support. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.